Hey, Shika.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late.
All good, all good. I just started recording. So, hello, everyone listening. As usual, subscribe, like, it really helps the channel. We are going to be discussing some architecture changes coming to the code suggestions today. I'm going to probably share my screen. There is an agenda doc on the invite, so you can feel free to open it and have a look. I put everything in there. I'm going to share my screen and show it as well. Share. Gonna make this a little bit, come on, a little bit bigger. So, what we are trying to figure out today is there is initiative discussed here. Is that a public epic? I can make it just private the video if it is. No, it is public. All right. So we are discussing improving latency of code suggestions. And so far, the proposed solution, correct me if I'm wrong, Jan, is for the completion requests, which are the fast ones when you are just typing and you are getting back snippets of what the model suggests. For those where the latency is really critical, we are planning to skip the monolith and instead go to AI gateway directly. So this is going to be really silly diagramming because I have no idea about what's happening pretty much past this error, but this is how I imagine it, and Jan will correct me. Currently, we are using the normal personal access token for GitLab, and we are calling the code suggestions completions endpoint, and we are passing in what's the intent. This is actually language server doing it for at least the VS Code extension. I guess for JetBrains, it's happening directly. And so regardless of whether the intent is completion or generation, we call this endpoint in GitLab that calls through to AI Gateway that calls the actual model API. And that we saw on the epic, scroll somewhere up here, that this monolith part adds what, like 140 milliseconds, give or take, to the latency, the response time. And so we save those 140 milliseconds at the time when it's most critical, which is the completions. So that's the high level view. And now what I want to focus on in this session is what kind of changes they are described here in the agenda doc. This is the proposed steps, and I want to distill from it what changes affect the extensions, and then be able to estimate, like based on our discussion and the context we get today, be able to estimate how much effort does it mean for changing language server and how much effort it is to change everything that's not connected to language server, all the other extensions. So,
yeah,
go on.
sorry. Sorry. Please go ahead if you wanted to mention anything else before we dive into the expected steps.
I'm just going to say quickly that my high-level understanding was that we will create a new endpoint, because currently GitLab does have an endpoint that gives away JVT tokens, but it's used only for like we have a self-managed, and those use endpoint similar to the one that we are going to be creating here to get JWT tokens for authenticated to the API gateway. But then the requests are still going, the old way is still self-managed, and then self-managed makes the request to gateway. So we will create a new endpoint that's specific for IDEs, that where IDE can request short-lived JWT token, and that one it's going to use for AI gateway. And
yes,
that's as far as I was able to decode from the discussion, and I would just probably ask Jan to reiterate.
There's some more detail in, there's the cloud connector issue. and they talk a bit about more detail in how this JWT flow is going to work. So it may be worth opening that issue up, and I think there's like a swim lane there. You can ask it to render that, and then there's a swim lane, and I think in the comments below as well, there's some sort of swim lane, which is useful.
Yeah, so this is one of possible solutions how the JWT token could be issued. We discussed this on Cloud Connector Office Hours today, and it might be that the flow will be eventually a little bit different. I mean, between the Rails instance and AI gateway and customers.com components. Anyway, from client point of view, this doesn't make any difference. And from client point of view, it will be still, client will still request Rails instance to provide a short-term token, which then will be used for accessing directly the AI gateway. So yeah, this schema can be used as one of to get better idea how these short-term tokens could be issued, but in reality it might be slightly different.
Okay. I wanted to I wanted to first focus on the boundary, like here for the IDE, and then once we get that sorted on some level, that will allow me to understand, to be able to estimate the effort, then I would love to know, at least really quickly from you, Jan, like on a very high level, how the rest of the systems are going to be handling the authentication. So that's pretty much this, but maybe, or whatever that issue was, I can't find it now, but here it was, like this, but maybe a little bit distilled for me. But first, let's focus on the API that we will get from GitLab.com, and if there is any difference in how we will interact with the self-managed, then I would also like to know that.
Awesome, cool.
So how would you like to go this, Jan?
Yeah, so if we proceed with this optimization, there are two major impacts on the architecture. First one is regarding the authentication, and the second one is about the decision on client side when to use direct requests to AI gateway and when to when to send it to Rails as it is now. So the first part, which is about authentication, what I expect we would do is that when client connects to the Rails, when the plugin is initialized, or I don't know if there is some existing endpoint, API endpoint, which is used for this basic initialization and fetching some basic data. But either, I mean, when the client starts, we would ask a Rails server to get to create a short-term token.
We should do like a token check process, So remember when we actually enter the token for the first time, like when the person does OAuth on the IDE or they enter a PAT, then we do this check token, right? Every time. So we check whether the token has the right authentication permissions,
Yes,
right?
we
So
do.
I think at that stage we can go fetch the token for the first time. So that's when we do the token for the first time, we can go and say, okay, let's go fetch a JWT as well. And then we fetch the JWT and cache it in the IDE.
Or like,
Actually,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So the there should be a request at the beginning, which as a result, client obtains both a short-term token and also AI gateway connection details like URL. So there is, I commented in the epic. Let me find.
Okay, would it be short-term AI gateway connection details? Yeah, it's here. This is, I just copy pasted your comment, the one that we are discussing. So here it is. That's the that's the.
I mean the response should contain not only the token, but also it should tell the client
where to request
where
the
to
code
connect.
suggestions.
Yeah, because we don't want to hard code anything on client side, but rather let Rails to decide it.
We had a few issues that were just changing URLs or deprecating URLs that we hard coded in the extension. So this is definitely nice touch.
Something like I will paste it to agenda.
Okay, so on our level that I really need to understand this, would it be fair to say the IDE when it starts and it's got the, before it makes first request for a code suggestions, I don't know where exactly we put it in the code, we'll figure it out. But before it makes first request for code suggestions, it will first need to do this exchange where it will ask its GitLab.com or self-managed instance. Is there going to be any difference in those endpoint? Or like, I called here the endpoint like get code suggestions token, whatever it's going to be called. Can I expect that this endpoint is going to be both in self-managed and GitLab.com?
Yes, I think that for this Git code suggestion token, it should be used the same Rails instance you use for which you have in the plugin settings. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, the one that you have your account set up for. Like when we are setting up accounts, you have instance URL and the personal access token for that instance. So you will just say instance URL, it's API, give me this. Awesome. So that makes sense. And so you exchange these JWT tokens that will, I assume, not going to last as long as our, for example, auth token lasts, which is 2 hours. I assume that the JWT token is not going to live for that long. Do you just for I don't need you to commit to a number, but like, do you have idea it's going to be like 10 seconds or 2 minutes or 20 minutes, like anything? Have you thought about it?
I expect it will be roughly about 1 hour, but this is something to clarify with connector team preferences.
We should do what we were doing earlier, Thomas. So remember when we had a very, very similar flow, actually, hilariously. But we used to check the the claim, right? The expiry claim on token. And based on that, we used to ask for refresh. So when the next, so we used to have a little bit of grace time, and then we used to say, okay, after this expiry time minus grace time, go and refresh the token. So we have to do something simple.
Makes sense. Okay. So we will do that. And then we have the key thing is that we will have the AI gateway URL and we will have valid JWT token, which we will use to request directly whatever URL we got here. And we only do it for the intent completion. For the intent generation, we will use the existing flow.
Correct.
Yeah. So I pasted a link to one of comments in the agenda. I wonder if it would make sense to make this more generic, like Rails returns back the list of intentions, and for each of the intention, it returns URL and JWT token. So it's
That's
more
cool.
generic in case we would want to expand this further with other intentions in the future. We don't need to do it. It's just one of options.
That's
And the idea is that if a client detects, okay, there is a completion intent, and later when typing, you detect that intent is completion, and you find that you have a specific URL for completion, you use this URL with token. If you don't find the specific URL, you just send everything to Rails as is.
I
Gotcha.
think that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea. If you return a list of intent, like a map of intent to URL or intent to URL and token type or something, then that would be useful.
Yeah, if it would be some extra work, we can iterate on this later. I mean, it's just an idea.
Let's start with that. I think we should start with that. It's a good idea to start.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything that makes it less likely that we will have to make changes on the client side to that logic, it sounds great to me. I like it.
Related to this, sorry for interruption, but related to this initialization phase, Tim today commented on the Epic, and he suggested to consider the upgrade approach, which is used for WebSockets. Yeah, that if you use HTTP connection, then it responds back with the upgrade response. So basically, the other approach would be that we would respond on the first completion request. We would respond to the client with, okay, hey, you can use this AI gateway URL and token directly if you want. This might be an alternative approach. I think that from functionality point of view, it's quite similar to what we were discussing, what I suggested in tasks, like using the initialize request. But if you would find this upgrade approach like better option or more generic, that's possible too.
I don't think it makes that much difference. I guess the option that were discussing with separate endpoint, I can imagine makes the code tiny bit easier to follow in the extensions in the client because you have like separate paths. You know, if I call this, for example, I was here wondering, but yeah, it's in the agenda. I was wondering like how will we support all the instances without a change? And both what you are talking about, both are actually, you know, if the instance doesn't, if it's an old instance, it doesn't offer you way to upgrade, that would be perfectly backwards compatible way to do it. But also, if this endpoint doesn't exist, that's a backwards compatible way of doing it. So I have a slight preference for having a separate endpoint because like the way how I imagine it implemented seems tiny bit clearly separated, but there is not that much of a difference. Like if one or the other makes it much easier on the backend side, then we can go with either.
Yeah, I have similar thoughts about this. I would slightly more inclined to separate initialize endpoint instead of upgrades. But yeah, so for now let's use
Assume
this.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then this makes all good sense. I think that I have enough information, John. If you would like to ask anything else from like the JetBrains perspective, whether there is anything about this flow that is not clear to you for estimating like how much effort it's going to be to no make sense.
Yeah, I think this makes perfect sense. So this is pretty straightforward.
Okay, then I've got all I need, and we have like 3 minutes to spare. I don't know whether that's enough time to dive into this puppy right here.
I wanted to also mention that this is the initialize part, and then I assume that then client will forward or send the completion requests to AI gateway directly.
Yeah,
The consequence
this
is
error.
that then we rely on the client to be able to decide between completion and creation requests. I mean, to detect intention. And I'm not sure how much work this means for client. From previous feedback, my understanding is that for LSP server, we
It's already
support.
the information is available already available. Yes, for LSP, but in JetBrains, I don't assume it is.
Yeah.
No, we're
So
not even doing. The problem is in JetBrains, we're not doing intent detection at the moment, right? Or at least I don't think we are. And so, like, we'll have a bit of problem. Like, I think we just call. I think we let AI gateway determine the intent,
Probably
and so
the
we'll have to
monolith, I
figure
think,
out how to.
does it. I think that the monolith has
monolith.
some
Yeah, that's correct.
three-seater
Yeah.
code that does the intent
No, we don't
detection.
use three-seater. We use just a basic regex to decide if we are inside an empty method or something like this. And it's very basic. The problem is that we don't have three-seater available on monolith side. So, yeah, it's tricky to make this
I
decision
think
there.
that's one of the big parts is that we need to figure out how to get intent detection into the JetBrains IDE. Otherwise, this kind of doesn't work, right? Because um, we need to figure out whether it's a generation or a suggestions request before deciding who to send it to. And that means that we need to do some sort of detection. Now, we could potentially take the regex and test it. We could use that, or we could figure out the better way of like what we're doing in the LSP is using tree sitter. And so we could use tree sitter to determine if we can get tree sitter working in the JetBrains.
Yeah. Just to clarify, it's not a hard requirement because I expect that whenever any client like JetBrains doesn't detect intent, it will just keep going to send everything to monolith. So there will not be any degradation or more pressure on getting this decision, making this intent detection available as soon as possible. But on the other side, as long as if the feedback from you guys is that JetBrains is used in, for example, 50% of clients and it's very difficult to do these implementations there, then it's important to consider if it makes sense. So
I'd also say, and this is more for our team, that we should prioritize getting language server with JetBrains working.
Yeah.
Like that should not be a very hard deal for us. It just hasn't taken the forefront of our thoughts.
I think that for code suggestions, it's not going to be as trivial as it would be for Duo Chat, just to go like on a tangent in a direction that doesn't concern or interest Jan. But like for the LSP for code suggestions requires keeping track of the changes with the document and knowing where exactly you are, and that logic re-implementing in JetBrains is not going to be like a day worth of work. I don't know. It might be like a
Right.
week.
I think it'll be a little longer than that, but we do have a lot of that
2 weeks.
logic sits in the we need that for what we're doing currently. We'd have to refactor it.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other optimization I was thinking for this path is one is that why not keep the connection open for code suggestions and just send it to a gateway? So like if you use HTTP to push or gRPC or something from the IDE to the AI gateway, like that could reduce latency because you're not reconnecting, right? Or maybe even HTTP keep alive can solve some of that. But if you do HTTP to push or some sort of binary connection, that could be a lot faster than just having a single,
yeah.
keep alive connection.
So I mean, now you are asking about still using direct connection from client to AI gateway, just but with different protocols, WebSockets versus. So from POCs I made, it turns out that actually usage of WebSockets at only quite a minimal benefit compared to keep alive HTTP keep alive connections, assuming that we use these short-term JWT tokens for authentication. So we could use WebSockets, but the benefit of safe, but the latency decrease is quite small compared to the work it means. Also, another thing to consider is that WebSockets makes the service stateful, which will make it a bit more trickier when using, and AI Gateway is stateless service at the moment. So it might be tricky to implement this if we want to make it still stateless with multi-region support.
Well, there are two things I'm talking about. One is the protocol itself. Like, I was thinking gRPC more than WebSockets because, but I was thinking the two things. There's the connection protocol itself, right? And so that you're saying WebSockets is like marginally the thing. But there's also the serialization protocol as well. Like we can reduce.
Which protocol?
So I was thinking we could use protobuf or something like that to binary serialize the JSON message so that it's smaller, right? Have you tried that kind of POC as well?
No, in POC I compared specifically WebSockets versus Keep Alive. But if you look at, so what I did, yeah, even if you look at the timing breakdown, we can see that we spent only a few milliseconds on AI gateway side. So
most of it is model time anyway.
So, and from POC, I would have to find it now, but if I remember correctly, the time difference was below 10 milliseconds. So then the question is whether even if we would use a different protocol, is it worth to save these 10 milliseconds or not?
Makes sense.
But I didn't focus on additional benefits like using gRPC or anything else when you are talking about it. If we could use, for example, some compression or something that might be worth to consider too. Yeah, but there
Sounds
is...
like we should add another field, like a protocol field, into the response where you are getting a list of endpoints for your intent suggestions, and this would be a two-way door. We can start with HTTP1, keep alive, and then we can shave off additional, whatever, 10 milliseconds if we want to by using some other encoding or another protocol. We are at time. If I've got yeah, go.
One more thing that we should clarify from just delivery point of view is what is the timelines for the cloud connector team delivering the JWT endpoint? And there are two aspects to this. One is that it needs to be delivered on the .com side, but then also rolled out to self-managed as well, right? And then with self-managed, we have the usual version issues, like we'll have to figure out that as well. So it's not just for self-managed, we'll have to check for generation, for intent is completion, but also like the version would be above wherever we have the JWT endpoint. And so we'll have to check like both those things, right? And so like that has to be added to our kind of workflow. And then we need to figure out like timing wise when is this going to be delivered. I think the cloud connector team is still working on the JWT endpoint. So, we need to figure that out.
I was thinking
Yeah.
about like taking this offline in terms of, that's going to be discussion that's going to involve Maverick, our engineering manager, and Dasha, product manager. But with what I've got from this meeting, I'll be able to say, this is going to be 2 weeks worth of work for an engineer to make that change, or whatever number I'll come up with, and then the timing they can decide. It seems to me like we will always have that fallback option regardless, so we won't
Yeah.
have to do like a big bang release. Um, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying that intent plus version is what we'll have to check for self-managed, and that's that's another.
Why the version?
Because the old versions will not have the new JWT generation endpoint. Like this get JWT token will not be present in older.
yeah,
Sorry. Yeah. I thought that if you would just get not found for the endpoint which is used, or
yeah.
just
That was my thinking
missing
as well.
field, then I mean that it would be possible to handle this gracefully, this missing endpoint, so we don't need to lock to specific version or synchronize
I see.
the release of
Yeah.
this. I will follow up with timeline questions on the Epic, because so far I wasn't even sure what are thoughts from editor and Cloud Connector teams about this optimization. So I'm not sure what are timelines. Code creation team has this as OKR for first quarter, but we don't have more specific timing, like that it must be part of 16.10. From what I know, that Cloud Connector will not get to it in 16.10 probably, so it will be
Yeah.
probably next milestone.
Yeah, it might concern. I'm gonna stop recording.